All right, welcome back to the Rudie Librarian. Haven't done a podcast in a while, but and I'm just going to do it erratically from now on, just whenever I feel like it. I'm not trying to keep to any schedule because that stresses me out. But you got to do one at the beginning of the year, talking about what was good from last year and maybe looking forward to the next year. And who better to do that with than my buddy Gary from Backyard Superheroes, from the Starlight Beacon Podcast, from the Monster Rally Podcast, from the on the Upbeat Podcast, from every podcast that's ever been created in the history of man. Welcome, Gary Mastriano.
All I do is podcast. That's my entire life. That's all I do. And I don't podcast enough with you, and you're my favorite person to podcast with.
Well, I like to hear that, even if it's a lie. Please lie to me more.
I cannot confirm or deny that, but yeah, sure.
So I'm going to jump right into it. And here's why I'm going to jump right into it, because I'm going to start with some of my highlights from this year, because we're trying to keep to a time schedule here. But one of my highlights this year specifically was meeting you face to face, Gary. And it was a strange meeting. Gary and I met online during COVID times through our love of ska and Star Wars. And we finally got to meet face to face, but it was not like a normal, didn't quite go how we planned, but it was good.
Yeah, I happened to be down in Texas where you live for work, and I was really excited. And I said, hey, let's get together. This is a chance for us to grab some dinner, meet in person. Brian and I had hosted podcasts before. We talk very, very frequently. We're pretty close friends. I consider Brian one of my closest friends. So it was great to be able to meet in person. And Brian, if you remember, we were supposed to go out to dinner. And I think I messaged you the middle of the day and said, hey man, instead of dinner, you want to take me to the hospital?
Yeah, it was a little bit like that. Yeah, you were not well. And so our first hangout was me picking you up and then waiting in the emergency room while you got taken care of.
Yeah, I had a kidney stone. I'll share it. And it was terrible. I've had them before. And Brian was such a trooper to kind of hang out with me during that time. It was a terrible situation to have our first face-to-face meeting. But I do appreciate that you're such a good friend that during our first time we ever actually hung out, you drove me to the emergency room and you saw a version of me that was in a lot of pain. Now, I will say we did hang out the next day, and we did actually get dinner and have a really lovely time. But I do appreciate that.
Yeah, and you're a remarkable conversationalist while you're in pain, I'll say. Like, I don't know if I could have held the kinds of conversations you were holding. So that was good.
It was a good distraction. But yeah, I'm happy that was a highlight of the year for you, because that was one of my highlights. Just in general, like I feel like I got to meet a lot of my online friends in person for the first time as the world got, I don't want to say more normal, but as we distanced ourselves from COVID and everything, people started to get out a little bit. I got a new job where I was traveling, so I was able to interact with people who I maybe have not been able to interact with before.
Yeah, and I'm excited for you with that job. It's going to bring you back here pretty soon again, so we'll get to hang out again, which we're looking forward to.
I know. Well, we'll have to offline about that. I was supposed to come in February. I might not be, but I'll definitely be there before the summer.
Okay. So another highlight for me, you're talking about getting to meet people that you've met online and stuff like that. I got to see, beginning of the year, I saw Bite Me Bambi with of course, immediately my brain goes blank. It was with, you know who it's with.
Glow Skulls.
The Voodoo Glow Skulls and Mustard Plug. Yeah, yes. Yeah, that's who it was. And man, all three of those bands, really phenomenal. I had never seen either Mustard Plug or Voodoo Glow Skulls live. Both of them great. Voodoo Glow Skulls live was insane. Like one of the craziest live shows I've ever seen. Just so much energy. And the guy who was singing, who I think now has left the band, and their old singer came back. But
correct.
But the guy who was singing with Voodoo Glow Skulls was like, yeah, as soon as I get home, I'm having knee surgery. But in the meantime, let me just rock this entire house on stage. So very good. Maybe a bigger highlight, and I did get to meet those guys beforehand. They were meeting with my buddy Cool Chris from Ska Punk International about their upcoming Mutiny release, which came out and was a great release. But I got to meet Talina from Bite Me Bambi. That was a highlight. It was brief, but I was very excited to do that. And then later in the year, I got to see Half Past Two. So kind of Tara and Talina and you were the first ska friends I made, and I got to meet all of you this year.
Hey, look
And
at
it was
that.
amazing. And I got to see Catbite for the first time, which was really cool. These are all bands I've had on the podcast that I've never met face to face. So super exciting for all of those.
It was a good year for ska music. I know that it's not all we're going to talk about today, but for you and I, that's something that brings us together. I also saw Half Past Two for the first time, so that was really fun. But it was a good year. I feel like there was so many good releases that I'm sure we'll talk about. The best of all was, of course, Backyard Superheroes put out the greatest album that's ever existed. But other bands also put out records we could talk about, I suppose.
And we're definitely going to talk about that Backyard Superheroes album. It was really good. I've got just a couple more highlights, and then if you want to share any of yours, but I'll say I got to see a couple guys that I've loved for a long time. Like these are like maybe top 10 artists for me, or at least top 20. I could see Dashboard Confessional for the first time. I've been a fan of theirs forever. I've even had tickets to their show before and had to sell them because circumstances. So I got to see Dashboard Confessional for the first time, and I got to see Derek Webb, who's a Christian artist. Well, he's not Christian anymore, actually, but growing up, he was a Christian artist. And he's a really good voice, I think, for Christians who have a different view than, the main view, I guess. I don't know how to say that. I don't know. But like
alternative view on Christianity?
Yeah, more than progressive even, but like, yeah, something like that. Like he's he made a ruckus because he toured with a drag queen Christian artist named Flamey Grant, and he also had has really supported a Christian artist who is an LGBTQ individual named Semler, who's phenomenal. She's a really great singer songwriter. Uses she or they, or uses all pronouns. So they all bought tickets because they weren't invited to the Dove Awards, even though Semler had a top one. Had a number one Christian track on the iTunes Christian market. They weren't invited because of the LGBTQ status. So they all bought tickets to the Dove Awards and showed up, and Derek Webb showed up in a polka dot dress with a pearl necklace on. And so it was and they invited a bunch of other queer Christians to come, and they went to the Dove Awards together. And I love that. I love that a lot. So
there's some punk rockness about that I really respect.
For sure. So he doesn't get invited to play in churches anymore. He's not a Christian, and he talks about that a lot. But he actually played in an Episcopal church here, so I got to go see him, and I got to go see an R&B artist. Well, I don't know, R&B, soul, country, singer songwriter, kind of mix of everything. Leon Bridges, that I like a lot. So that was my best of as far as activities. What else you got?
Oh boy. I got to play a lot of shows. When we put out a new record, we were able to play a bunch of different shows. We played more shows this year than we have since at least pre-pandemic. So that was really great. Some of the highlights, Buffalo Ska Fest, which we played every year, which is a really fun little ska fest. We took a road trip up. I got to drive up with my two best friends who are also in the band, Tam and Shelly. We had a really fun road trip. We got to an Airbnb. The whole band was staying in Airbnb for the weekend. So the festival was a Friday, Saturday, Sunday festival. We were playing Friday, but staying the whole weekend. And we got to the Airbnb and we found bed bugs. So that was terrible. So we had to leave the Airbnb and we all got into like a hotel and just had a really fun time hanging out with the band. I've gone on record saying like, I hate touring and I will never be a touring musician. We've done 2 tours and I hated it. That's not a life for me. So this was like a little microcosm of that, which I dug. But while I was there, I was up in Buffalo, I got to run, as a lot of people who listen to me on the billion podcasts I'm a runner. I run every day. I got to run in this beautiful park in Buffalo, and I don't remember the name of it, but it was also one of the best bird watching parks in the country. So I'm also a big bird watcher. So I went running and bird watching, and then went to a ska show afterwards. So like, if you could encapsulate what a perfect day for Gary looks like, it's going running, going bird watching, going to a ska show, eating Domino's at like 11:30 at night. And I did all that in one day. So I was a happy camper.
Nice.
That was really great, and just a lot of really good experiences at home with the family. Didn't do many major like vacations or anything, but this was a year of just building some really great equity with the family and having some really quality time in between being sick a lot. I was sick a lot this year, in 2024. So 2025, you got to be better than that.
Yeah, and I'm hoping for that for you, man. You definitely had a lot of medical issues that have, hopefully we're seeing the turnaround on that stuff. So one thing that I did, and I want to dive in pretty quick just for the sake of time. One thing that I did is I really tracked everything I watched this year, like all the shows that I watched and all the movies that I watched. And what I determined at the end is I watched too much. It was
you
like,
gotta get on Letterboxd, dude. Are you not on Letterboxd?
I am.
Oh, okay.
I got on it this year. That's how I tracked the movies.
Got it.
But yeah, so between the movies and the seasons of TV shows, and I'll count like a season, let's say it was one thing, just like a movie's one thing. I watched like 90 something things this year.
Okay.
And that's a lot considering there's only 365 days, and those TV shows that I'm only counting as one usually took multiple days.
Sure.
So it's a lot, but I did see some great things. So let's talk movies. You want to start with some of your favorite movies? Because I think you're going to say at least one that I overlap with. I actually took it out of mine.
I saw 80 movies this year. So new release movies. That's how I count it.
Wow.
And that's one of the joys of traveling, I guess, is when I do travel for work, I either go to baseball games, I go to the emergency room, or I go to the movies. So it's one of those three things that I'm going to be doing. Spend a lot of time on planes and at movie theaters. So I saw 80 new release movies this year, which is down for me. Usually I crack about 100. I could say right off the bat, the movie that I think was by far the best movie I saw this year, and the movie I walked out of the movie theater thinking, holy moly, I need to tell everyone to see this movie, was a movie called The Substance. Have you heard of this movie?
I think maybe just from you.
Okay. Yeah, it's a body horror, gross movie with Demi Moore and Margaret
I didn't
Qualley.
hear this from you. I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you, but I didn't hear this from you, but I did hear it recently on something that I watch or listen to, and they were saying the same kind of thing. It was body horror, something they're not usually into, and they really, really loved it. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it was a great movie. Great performance by Demi Moore. She actually just won a Golden Globe for it, I believe. And Margaret Qualley was in it, but it's not going to be for everybody. And I want to preface that it's a very gory, graphic, sexualized movie, but it's very, very good. And I walked out of that theater like, okay, I just experienced something. Yeah. Some other highlights for me. I like the movie Y2K. I feel like there's a lot of good horror movies this year. The movie Y2K was maybe not a great movie, but when I think about movies, I think about like, what did I enjoy the most versus what was great? You could see a movie that, is technically great, but it's just like, oh, this is boring, or this is not going to resonate with me, or I'm not going to revisit it. Y2K was a movie about like, what if when Y2K happened, all the machines in the world started killing people? I thought that was super fun. And the nostalgia of 1999 and the way that they did it, like, so you and I who were growing up in middle school and high school in that time, like it would have really resonated. So I like that. I liked Saturday Night, which is I thought was really well done version of the first episode of Saturday Night Live, the 90 minutes leading up to that. The casting in that movie is fantastic. The actor that they got to play like Chevy Chase is chef's kiss. Embodies the douchiness of Chevy Chase to like a T. He was very, very good.
That movie is on my list. I have not seen that, but I'm going to for sure.
Yeah, I recommend it. It's very good. 4:30 movie, which was the new Kevin Smith movie, which was filmed like 10 minutes from my house here in New Jersey. Again, my theme this year a lot was nostalgia. Even the movies I've named so far all have a nostalgia tinge to them. So 4:30 movie was just about like a group of high school kids going to the movies and what that day looks like, a day spent at a movie theater. And that's like, okay, that's how I spend most of my days now, but let alone when I was in high school.
Yeah.
I really liked Lisa Frankenstein, which was a fun little like Beetlejuice type of riff. It kind of had Beetlejuice vibes. I liked it more than Beetlejuice, which I didn't love. But Lisa Frankenstein was really fun. And then a couple others I want to mention. I just watched last week on New Year's Day, Late Night with the Devil, which was it's about a talk show, like a late night talk show where they do a live exorcism on the talk show in the 70s. So that was pretty wild. and then a
Wow.
movie called The Order, which was about the Ku Klux Klan in the early 80s and the FBI trying to stop them. And it just had dynamite performances from Jude Law and Nicholas Hoult.
Oh, wow.
I did separate out my documentaries because I saw a bunch of really good documentaries as well. I saw Getting Lost by our mutual friend Taylor Morden.
Yeah.
Lost is my favorite TV show of all time. So obviously, if Taylor's doing a documentary about it, I'm hyped for that. Music by John Williams was a really great documentary on Disney Plus about John Williams. And you just watch that and you're like, oh, John Williams is the greatest musician that's ever lived. Like, that's your takeaway from watching that. It's like, there's no one who's ever been a better songwriter than John Williams. And I will fight that forever. Jim Henson, there's a great documentary about him called Idea Man that came on to Disney Plus. I'm a huge Henson fan. We have the same birthday. And he's probably like my biggest role model in life. And then finally, the Christopher Reeve documentary, Superman, which interestingly enough, like that's a great documentary about Christopher Reeve, but it's also a great documentary about Robin Williams, who I didn't know was his best friend.
And
So
college
like,
roommate.
yeah, like I got to tell you, watching that documentary, I was in tears within like 3 minutes of that movie starting. So really great. I know I rambled on for a long time, but I'll give you a chance to ask any questions or give your list.
No, I love your list. In fact, I think I had Jim Henson Idea Man on my list and I took it off because I saw you were going to talk about it. But yeah, loved that one. Loved the John Williams one. There's, some great Beatles stuff that's been on Disney. Disney Plus has been kind of killing it, I feel like.
The Beatles one, Beatles 64, I think I like that too.
Yeah. So I haven't watched the Superman one yet, but it's on my list too. And then I haven't watched Taylor's yet. I wasn't a Lost fan. My mom was a big Lost fan. But like, I think I'll still really enjoy the documentary, and I love Taylor, so of course I want to watch that one.
I feel like Lost is you should watch Lost.
I think I will maybe one day. Like my thing right now is just like by the time my kids go to bed, we're ready to go to bed. So we don't really watch a ton of stuff, But for me, I think my movies are much more like mainstream. I'm not surprised by a lot of yours. I don't watch much in the way of horror, but I know that you do, and I do occasionally enjoy some of that. So I'm not at all surprised by some of the stuff that's in your list. Some of my stuff's more like mainstream. So like I really, we went and saw Wicked. Wicked was amazing. As a family, we went. My wife is not a huge go to the movies kind of person. And when that movie ended, she was like, wow. And so that's impressive. That's a big 2 thumbs up from her. We saw Twisters this summer and really, really enjoyed Twisters. I took the kids to see it, and
Twisters was a ton of fun.
It was maybe a tad intense for the kids, but they enjoyed it.
Yeah.
So I will say, like that night, they definitely had a nightmare about a tornado, and I was like, my bad, sorry. As someone who's a big Marvel fan, I really enjoyed Deadpool and Wolverine. That was a really fun movie. Was it deep and like I don't know. Is it like life-changing? No, but it was a lot of fun. From the very early, credits fight with like whatever NSYNC or Backstreet Boys playing, it's a lot to enjoy. I'm a big John Green fan, the young adult author, and this year he released the movie version of Turtles All the Way Down. It was a streaming movie, not in theaters, but I really, really enjoyed that. The Bob Marley biopic, One Love, that was a pretty early release this year in 2024. I loved that movie. The Amy Winehouse movie, Back in Black, I really loved that movie. I thought they did a really good job on that. The Best Christmas Pageant Ever, which came out in November. It's based on a Barbara Robinson book. And like for me, The Best Christmas Pageant Ever is maybe one of the best Christian movies I've ever seen. And it's one of the things that I wanted to go see for that reason. The guy who directed it is the guy who does the show The Chosen, which is a very well-respected TV show about Jesus that I also really like. And I usually don't like most Christian media movies and stuff. They're usually pretty cheesy. But this movie, The Best Christmas Pageant Ever, was really good. And it really kind of points a finger at how sometimes Christians can be so judgmental. And that's completely antithetical to the heart of God. So I really enjoyed that. I really liked the documentary Will and Harper with Will Ferrell. Have you seen this one?
No, but I wanted to. It looked really good.
It's so good. So I'm gonna say honestly, I forget who Will Ferrell's friend is, and her name is Harper, but she's transgender, and she was like a writer on Saturday Night Live when she was a man, and then as an older person transitions to become a woman, and then they travel the country together, and just kind of reflect on their friendship and the transition and what that means to both Harper's life and to their friendship and stuff like that. And there's some SNL people that make cameos in it, but it was really beautiful. And of course, the place that treated Harper the worst was close to my home. So it was a little disappointing, but not surprising. But it was a really beautiful movie about friendship and all that. So what I added that wasn't on there when I took off the idea man is I just went and saw Lord of the Rings War of the Rohirrim right before the new year. And as a Lord of the Rings fan, I really enjoyed it. It's an animated movie in Japanese animation style. And it was just really well done. It was a fun movie. And my last movie on my list is a movie called Conclave, which is based on a novel. And it's essentially about the death of the Pope. And all of the cardinals have to get together to elect a new Pope. And it's kind of about that process. And in that process, it's kind of about, you see sort of even within the church, the sort of politics that can play a role in the church. You also see like people trying to make a decision about what should make it to where this person is no longer able to be Pope and what is not big enough deal for that. And it was just really well done as well. Just a really touching movie, hard movie to watch in some ways. But again, I thought a really important movie. I think it's good right now for the church to self-examine based on just a lot of things that have been happening in the world around us. And so I'm a huge fan of this movie because it's kind of about that.
Is that Ray Fine is the lead in that movie? Yes.
He is, yeah. And he's really good.
Yeah, I've wanted to see that. I think it's streaming now, so I'll probably get around to it. And he got pretty good reviews, rave reviews for his performance in that.
Yeah, and I just saw it on streaming. I hadn't been aware of it, and then somehow I saw a trailer relatively recently, and I was like, oh man, I want to see this. And so finally I made time and watched it. So it's up there in my top 10 too.
What I think was interesting about this year when reflecting on 2024 in film is both my list and your list. You have a couple more mainstream movies than I do. I did not get to see Wicked. I really, really wanted to. I just didn't make it out to the theater. But I feel like this was a year of diversity in movies, where what I mean by that is just diverse type of movies were successes. We didn't have a runaway, huge monster movie like an Avengers. Like Deadpool was really big, Inside Out 2, both those movies made a lot of money. But I feel like there was no movie that like dominated the pop culture zeitgeist like we've had in the past. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, not quite to the degree. I would put Wicked up there too. I think Wicked, especially at the end of the year, would be kind of in those top three. But yes, nothing quite to that level. I mean, money-wise, yes, but yeah.
Yeah, and we saw a lot of different types of movies become hits. I'm happy you said Twisters. Twisters was such a fun movie. I love the original Twisters. The original Twister, and Twisters made me just love Glenn Powell even more. The man is a movie star, and I love him. He was also in a movie that just barely, I left it off my list, but I want to give a shout out to, and if you haven't seen it, I recommend it, called Hitman. It's on Netflix, and he is the lead in that, and he plays a lot of different types of characters in it. It's a very good movie.
Okay. Did you say Hitman or Pitman?
Hitman. H-I-T.
Okay. Like an assassin. Yeah. Gotcha.
Yes, correct, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I have to check that out. And if we have time, we may get into some of what we're looking for in 2025, but I want to keep us on track to talk about what we are fans of in 2024. Anything else that you want to talk about as far as that goes?
No, 2025. The only movie that is the top of my list is Superman, and then a bunch of other movies. I mean, that's it.
Okay. Well, real quick, I can probably share what I'm looking forward to in 2025 if I can find my note.
I guess Fantastic Four. Those are the two I'm really looking forward to, Superman and Fantastic Four.
Yes. There we go. It's right next to the other note. Yeah, real quick, I can throw out for me for movies. Captain America, Brave New World. I want to see. Thunderbolts. I'm looking forward to seeing. So Thunderbolts is the trailers for that look really great. There's a live action Lilo and Stitch. I'm not entirely sure how I feel about it yet, but I do love Lilo and Stitch, and especially the sort of adoption themes in that were pretty important to us when we started adopting our kids. Jurassic World Rebirth is coming out in 2025 on July 2nd, and it's going to have Scarlett Johansson, who is a huge Jurassic Park fan, and like that was her goal in life, was to be in the Jurassic World movies. So there's a really cute interview with her about that. Wildwood is going to be a stop motion animated movie from Leica Studios, the people who did Coraline, based on a trilogy of books by Colin Malloy, the lead singer of the Decemberists. And I love that trilogy of books, so I'm really looking forward to that. Superman, July 11th. Fantastic Four, July 25th. Batman Part 2 just got postponed, so that one's out. And then Wicked Part 2 in November. That's my most anticipated movies in 2025.
Good stuff. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of great movies that come out that I see. I see pretty much everything. But for me right now, my hype is for Superman and Fantastic Four. Those are my two favorite superheroes. So they're both coming out 2 weeks apart from each other.
Superman was really important to us too when we adopted. You know, when we got ready to adopt, I was like thinking about all the superheroes and how they're all like orphans. And I was like, do they live good lives? And I was like, well, Spider-Man pretty much lives in constant guilt. So no, you know, but like Superman was the one that really embodied hope. And I was like, what's the difference? Well, he had these phenomenal adoptive parents, you know? So.
And I tend to like the Superman stories where his father is still alive. They change that from time to time in different movies if Pa Kent is alive. But I like when he still has Pa Kent to go back to. And he has that, to your point, that really hopeful family life to go back to.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to it. It looks really interesting. The trailers are good.
I'm not the biggest James Gunn fan, but it feels like he's not doing the Guardians thing with this one. This is, I believe he even said there's like no needle drops. It's all score, which I'm like, okay, thank you. I don't need to hear Beastie Boys in my Superman movie.
Yeah, well, and one thing I like about it is he's starting kind of where the world's already established instead of like origin story again, which like sometimes you're like, well, you need the origin, but like with Superman, we've seen the origin so many times. It's kind of like with Spider-Man when they decided not to really do the origin with Tom Holland. I think that's good. Let's jump into music, shall we? I'll start the music here. I got into country again. I mean, I love country music. I love all music, but I got into country again for a while. And the Twisters soundtrack and Post Malone's new album, F1 Trillion, were albums that really kind of pushed that forward. Even Miranda Lambert, which I didn't put on my list, but those three albums I really, really enjoyed and listened to a lot. I listened to the Decemberists put out a new album called As It Was, So It Ever Will Be. Excuse me, As It Ever Was, So It Will Be Again. That's the name of the album. And it's so good. And like it's a 2 LP. I've got it on vinyl. The back side of the second LP is a 20-minute song called Joan in the Garden, which is so good. There's a band called Your Broken Hero. Have you ever checked them out?
No.
Okay, so Your Broken Hero is like Emo's Not Dead. It's the guy that runs Emo's Not Dead, Matt Kutzall, has his own emo band called Your Broken Hero, and it's kind of a satire band. Like they make emo songs making fun of emo, but also they're really good emo. And so he did this album called The End, E.N.D, which is like Emo's Not Dead. And it's got all these amazing like guest spots on it. And it's so good. It's like all the songs he's written over the years in one album. And I highly recommend checking it out and also checking out like the music videos. Like the very first one, which is like a Letter to Ashley, I believe is the name of it, is such a funny video. And but also really good emo. So that's on my list. Definitely some ska. So Half Past Two's new album, Talk Is Killing Me, was amazing. It was great to see them touring on that. Not only are they great, but I just want to especially shout out their new drummer. Absolutely kills it. She is phenomenal. Call Me Malcolm's album, Echoes and Ghosts, was really, really, really good. I really loved having those guys on the podcast as well. Runaway Ricochet's Diminishing Returns is another album I really, really enjoyed a lot. And And then Backyard Superheroes put out a phenomenal album. I'm going to say their best album ever, and really enjoyable front to end. And I also put on a new Snow Patrol album, The Forest is the Path. Found myself singing some of that a lot while I was working morning duty at school. And then Leon Bridges' new album, Leon, was really good. I was really very, very excited to get that one and then to see him tour on that too.
I'll take full credit for that Backyard Superheroes album. It was all me. I wrote every single thing. I did it. I played every instrument and sang everything. It was all me.
You did great. You were phenomenal.
Thank you. Thank you. I put a lot of work into it. It was all me. No, you're right. There was a lot of good music this year, especially ska music. It was a ton of really good ska releases. When on the Upbeat every year, we do our end of year wrap up and we do like 5, right? We do 5 singles, 5 EPs, 5 albums. It was really, really hard for me to narrow down each of those lists because there was so much stuff that I loved. So that was great. The only disappointing thing is so many bands put out stuff in 2024 that I'm like, well, who's going to put out stuff in 2025? Although I have already heard some albums that are coming out this year and they're great. So excited for that.
Yeah. And I'll get to like most anticipated music in a second. But I will say, like, I posted in one of the Facebook ska groups, what ska are you looking forward to in 2025? And I was kind of hoping that, some people who knew more than I do would shout out some stuff I wasn't aware was coming out so I could get excited about it. And I got a lot of like Streetlight Manifesto, a lot of Real Big Fish, things that are very, very unlikely to happen, which is, it's funny, but it's also like, come on, there's so many ska bands out there. Like what ska stuff is coming out that we're excited about? I would not be surprised.
3 full albums. I've heard 3 full albums that are coming out this year that I can't share. I think I told you who they were, but I can't share them publicly, but they're all very good. And I'm excited for those. There are 3 artists that I love. And I know some more people who are working on stuff, but I don't want to spoil anybody's announcements, but I know that there is good stuff coming. But so many of my favorite bands, I think all of them put out albums last year. So I'm like, oh, what do I have to look forward to this year?
I would look forward to, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's a new We Are the Union album. But at the same time, I know that that they're kind of doing other stuff too, besides just making music now. So we'll see. I did not get a chance to listen as much as I'd like to the new Kill Lincoln album, and I really enjoy Kill Lincoln. So I did have a friend that went and saw them, and I was like, you're going to really love seeing them live, and they were very impressed. So that's cool.
I want to say my favorite albums from the ska perspective of last year. My favorite album was a band called Something to Do, who are from Wisconsin. They're my favorite ska band, the current active, I guess, new ska band. And I've been a big fan of them forever. They put out a great album at the beginning of the year. And then also right around the same time in January, my second favorite album of the year came out, and that's by an Australian band called the Kitty Hawks. And I had been excited for their album for a while leading up to it. They put it out. It's excellent. Friends with those guys and gals in that band. So my 2 favorite ska albums actually came out in January of last year. And there was some great stuff.
Great.
They're both great albums. And there's some great stuff that came out after that. But those are the ones that I kept going back to and resonated the most with me. And then from a non-ska perspective, I really like the new Eminem album, The Death of Slim Shady. It is a tough listen by design, on purpose, right? It's abrasive, more abrasive than Eminem's been in a long time, but he was revisiting that Slim Shady character that was prevalent earlier in his career. So yeah, it's not an album that I would listen to kind of, with my kids in the car for sure. And it's a tougher listen than some of his more recent stuff. But again, it's by design. And I thought he was really excellent on a lot of those songs and got that message across. Then I also listened to a lot of great singles by this rapper called Mega Ran, who is a nerdcore rapper that put out a lot of really fun wrestling and video game themed rap songs. So those are some of the highlights of the year for me. But this year was also a year that I went back and listened to a lot of music I had never listened to. I got into a musical genre called chap hop, so CHAP, like you're my chap, like the British term, and that is music that's like rappers who are pretending to be steampunk gentlemen in the 1800s England. That's the genre of music.
That sounds great. I think I'd love that.
Yeah. Yeah, so super fun. Professor Elemental is one of them. He just put out a new single recently. Hang on one second. I'm gonna look up the name of that guy I listened to. For some reason, it's escaping me right now, but it was in my top like 5 songs of the year were from this one rapper, and I cannot remember his name. This is so embarrassing and awkward. Brian, I'm so embarrassed and awkward right now.
That's okay. That's how we are every day.
I'm just an embarrassing and awkward person. Where the heck is it?
Well,
I listened to a lot of Limp Bizkit this year, I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
I love Limp Bizkit. I'm seeing them in May with Metallica. I'm super, super excited for that.
They have a ska release coming out this year. Fingers crossed.
If Limp Bizkit did a ska album, that would be awesome. Fred Durst is in the movie Y2K that I mentioned, by the way.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
I'm going to say the only music I have right now written down that I'm most anticipating for this year, for 2025, is something I just found out was coming out, which is a new Japanese Breakfast album. I don't know if you've ever listened to Japanese Breakfast, but I really, really love them.
Yeah.
And they have an album called From Melancholy Brunettes and Sad Women coming out on March 21st. And I'm really looking forward to that. Also, Julian Baker is doing an album with Torres, like Julian Baker and Torres, and I'm really enjoying what I've heard of that so far. So I would anticipate both of those being released this year, and I'm very excited about those.
The name of that rapper I couldn't think of, by the way, was Mr. B, the Gentleman Rhymer.
Nice.
And all of his, again, it's the concept is he is like a British dignitary or British like fancy man guy thing, steampunk dude in the 1800s, and just raps about that lifestyle. And it's just, it's fantastic.
Right on. All right, I got to jump into books here. So the books, my favorite.
Do you like books? Is that a thing that you like?
I do, and you know what? That's one of the things that I'm loving about the changes I'm making to the Rudie Librarian right now. Is I feel like I'm going to be able to talk about all the books that I love. I've kind of held off on some of those, but so my top 10 books. The first book I've got mentioned here is a book called The Ex-Evangelicals by Sarah McCammon. Sarah McCammon's an NPR journalist who grew up in the Christian in the sort of the Christian subculture that I grew up in the 90s, and deconstructed really in the 2016 to 20s, kind of thing. And so she kind of writes about why so many of us have our faith has shifted, looks very different, and a lot of us are no longer Christians, but there are a lot that still are. And it's a really, really good book. I feel like if anyone wants to understand me as a Christian person, that book would help them. So there's a book called Liturgy of the Ordinary by Tish Harrison Warren that I read this year, which is just about like seeing every moment as sacred. Another Christian book was called Bible Translations for Everyone, which is just a book about Bible translations that's really good by a YouTuber that I like named Tim Wildsmith. Tim's also a professor and pastor at Belmont University in Nashville, Tennessee. Fiction book called The Faculty Lounge by Jennifer Mathieu. Jennifer Mathieu wrote the book Moxie. Faculty Lounge is a great book and a love letter to teachers. But it's an interesting story about like a substitute teacher, which is a former retired teacher, like dies in the teacher's lounge. And it's kind of everything that happens after that. The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune, which is a fantasy novel. Really good. Loved that. The Fire, the Water, and Maudie McGinn. That's a Bluebonnet. It's on the Bluebonnet list this year, which is like a Texas Book Award list. And it's about a young girl who really struggles with anxiety, especially following like her house burns down, her and her dad's house burned down, and they end up living in this like mobile home on the beach in the town where he grew up. And it's a really beautiful story. The Fall of Gondolin, which is, kind of one of the stories from like the Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien, but it was expanded into a full novel by his son, Christopher Tolkien. I read that this summer. It was really good. Got to have a Star Wars book. So The Path of Deceit by Tessa Gratton. I didn't read a ton of Star Wars this year, but I really loved The Path of Deceit, which is the one that you really were like, you're going to love. And I did. Great,
right?
Yeah. And it kind of deals with like religious extremism. So there's a theme going in my life right now. The Curious Christmas Tale by Haley Stewart. This is a children's book, but it's about these mice nuns that live in the parish that G.K. Chesterton is the pastor of, and they kind of like fall in love with his Father Brown mysteries, and then they solve mysteries themselves. And then Small Things Like These was a novella. I haven't read a lot of novellas, but I read this this is the last book I read for the year. It's just over 100 pages, just adapted to a movie starring oh shoot, what's his name? The guy who played Scarecrow in Batman.
Cillian Murphy.
Yeah, Cillian Murphy. Yeah. So and this is about a guy who like works. He owns a business that like delivers coal around Ireland, probably in the 90s. And he discovers this thing that this was a real thing, but like a Magdalene, I believe it's called Magdalene or maybe Magdala laundry. But what would happen is like when young girls got pregnant, their parents would send them to the nuns basically to like hide them and hide their shame. And these nuns would often put them through, they would make them work in these forced labor in these laundries and really rough conditions, treat them very bad. Many of them would lose their babies. And the last Magdalene laundry was discovered in the 2000s, like it was still happening not that long ago. So it's a fictional story set in Ireland, but it's based on real things that happened. And it was very powerful little novella. So those are my books for the year. Very diverse, a lot of faith, obviously, because it's a big part of my life, but a lot of really good, diverse books.
Yeah, some of those sound very, very interesting.
Any books for you this year that stood out?
So books is interesting, and I noticed that you did the same thing. Like with movies, we talked about movies and music released in this year. But books, I'm not always as timely with books as I am with seeing movies and music. So books that were released last year, aside from Star Wars, the only one that stands out to me from 2024 releases was Bridge to Bat City by Ernest Cline.
Oh yeah,
Ernest Cline wrote Ready Player One. So he did a YA book called Bridge to Bat City. I recommend it. It's about found family, kind of a theme of what we're talking about today, interestingly enough. And it was super fun, really cute little book. Aside from that, I went back and read a lot of books I've been meaning to read. I didn't read as much Star Wars this year. Like I'm kind of stalled on the High Republic for now. I kind of took a break because it's just a lot. There's a lot of content. But some that stuck out to me, maybe my favorite read of the year was Yours Cruelly, Elvira by Cassandra Peterson, who is Elvira. So it's her autobiography, which was just fascinating. That lady's lived an amazing life that like intertwines with so many celebrities and interesting moments in pop culture. I'm looking at my list here. Blood, Sweat, and Pixels by Jason Scheer. I really enjoyed, was about what goes into developing video games and what that looks like and the strenuous process and deadlines of video games. And in that same sense, I read a great book by an author named Flint Dial. And he wrote a book called The Game Master. It's not about video games. It's he was the head writer for G.I. Joe and Transformers in the 80s. So it's his biography about like what that job was like. So I thought that was really interesting. What was the other one that stuck out to me? I had it on my list. Yeah, those are the ones that were like the big ones. Oh, and then there's a really great book that I do recommend. A guest on the Upbeat this week, not this week, this year was Becca Spence DuBois wrote a book called Pick It Up. So it's a rom-com about people in a ska band, which is great. I do recommend it. It is a little blue in some parts. There are some very adult things. I don't know. Did you read it, Brian?
No, but
okay.
It's funny that you say that. I'm not offended by that kind of stuff, but it is good to let people know because some people you get partway through a book and you're just like, oh my.
Yeah, I and she said this when she was on the Upbeat too. She's like, yeah, it's it's a rom-com book, but it deals with adults, so I wanted adult situations in there. But there are some chapters where things come up and they're like, oh, this is not in the same tone as the rest of those books, as the rest of the book. And I've never read. I don't read like erotic or erotica type of books. I've never read one of those before. And I would say this is the closest to that in some parts of the book. However, it's also a love letter to the ska scene. So I do recommend that.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out. So I've got to recommend a book to you right now, just because some of the stuff that you were saying stood out, and especially talking about that book by Elvira. You should read a book called Rain. I don't know if it's Rain or Rainy, and Delilah's Midnight Matinee by Jeff Zentner. Okay. So I'll just tell you real quick what this book is about. A contemporary novel about so this is a young adult novel, a contemporary novel about two best friends who must make tough decisions about their futures and the TV show they host in their senior year of high school. Every Friday night, best friends Delia and Josie become Rain Ravenscroft and Delilah Darkwood, hosts of the campy creature feature show Midnight Matinee on the local cable station TV6. But with the end of senior year quickly approaching, the girls face tough decisions about their futures. Josie's been dreading graduation as she tries to decide whether to leave for a big university and chase her dream career in midnight and mainstream TV. And Lawson, one of the show's guest performers, a talented MMA fighter with weaknesses for pancakes, fantasy novels, and Josie, is making her tough decision even harder. Scary movies are the last connection Delia has to her dad, who abandoned the family years ago. If Midnight Matinee becomes a hit, maybe he'll see it and want to be a part of her life again. And maybe Josie will stay with the show instead of leaving her behind too. As the tug-of-war between growing up and growing apart tests the bond of their friendship, Josie and Delia start to realize that an uncertain future can be both monstrous and momentous. And there's like a part where they go to like a horror convention. That's really cool. So I think you'd dig it.
I just reserved it from my local library as you were talking about it.
I love that you're using the library as a librarian. I appreciate that.
I also want to recommend, this is a weird book that I'm currently reading now, but it's just so fun to read about. Do you know the basketball player Kareem Abdul-Jabbar? You've heard of him.
All-time great superstar? Yeah.
Of course. Do you know that he's the current canonical writer of Sherlock Holmes?
I did not know that.
That is true.
That's awesome.
So, he's a huge Sherlock Holmes fan. So that's his second career, is he writes Sherlock Holmes novels. I'm reading one. So he started off by writing novels about Mycroft Holmes, who's Sherlock's brother, who pops up in a lot of the Sherlock Holmes stories. So I'm reading his Mycroft Holmes novels right now, and then I'm going to transition to his Sherlock Holmes novels. But I just think it's wild that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar writes Sherlock Holmes books.
That's awesome.
Like, they're in canon with the original Sherlock Holmes books, and they're like the continuation of those.
Well, real quick before we go any further, can you tell me where you're at for time?
I could probably get about five more minutes because I do have to jump to something else.
Okay. Then I'm going to throw out some of my most anticipated things here, and I may have to do some of it afterwards. I will say, I know for sure I'm going to one concert. I'm very excited about it. It's in May. It's another one of my all-time favorite musicians, although he is very controversial. His name's Ryan Adams. I'm going to the Ryan Adams Heartbreaker 25 tour. He is often very awful to his audiences. So I'm not entirely sure if it's going to be a good experience or a bad experience, but I will have seen him live. So I'm excited about that. TV shows I'm looking forward to this year. Reacher Season 3. I have really enjoyed Reacher. And Reacher Season 3 is coming out. If you enjoy violence, then this is a great show for you. Daredevil Born Again. Looking forward to that. Andor Season 2, April 22nd. Looking forward to that. Ironheart, June 24th. Looking forward to that. Wednesday Season 2 on Netflix in July. Looking forward to that. Eyes of Wakanda, August 6th. Looking forward to that. Wonder Man in December. Looking forward to that. And then these 4 shows are supposed to come out this year, but don't have set dates yet. Star Wars Visions Season 3, Sandman Season 2, Stranger Things Season 5, and Top Chef Season 22. I'm looking forward to all of that. Any shows you're looking forward to?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to all the ones you mentioned, of course, but also I'm looking forward to Severance Season 2. Severance is a really good show on Apple TV Plus. And then Yellow Jackets Season 3. Yellow Jackets is probably my current favorite TV show because it scratches that lost itch. But again, it's a tough watch. So if you anybody listening wants to check it out, just be warned, it is a very, very hard thing to watch because of the subject matter that it deals with. But I really enjoy Yellow Jackets. Season 3 comes out in February. I had another show I was thinking about, but I can't remember what it was. I guess Andor. I'm really excited for that. Just Star Wars. Just Star Wars is exciting.
Yeah. All right. My last thing I've got is books. And there's a lot of Star Wars stuff in here. So I'm going to blast through this pretty quick. I am way behind in reading my Star Wars. I'm still in phase 2 of High Republic. And I haven't read anything outside of High Republic in quite some time. So there's going to be a lot of Star Wars in here, but there's a lot of other stuff too. So February 18th, there's a devotional called God Didn't Make Us to Hate Us by Reverend Lizzie McManus Dale. I'm very much looking forward to that. She's somebody that I really love on social media. March 11th, Star Wars High Republic, Temptations of the Force reprint by Tessa Gratton. I don't own that book yet, so I'm looking forward to owning it. March 18th, Everything is Tuberculosis by John Green. This is an adult nonfiction novel about tuberculosis, which is still the disease that is killing more people in the world than anything else, but is also like completely like manageable with medication. So it's really a book about the issue of how we have this sort of inequality with access to medicine in the world, you know? And John is a phenomenal writer. His other nonfiction book was maybe one of my favorite books of all time, so I highly recommend it. April 1st, Star Wars High Republic Into the Light by Claudia Gray coming out. Claudia Gray is maybe one of the best Star Wars writers ever.
We like Claudia Gray, you and I. We're big fans of her.
We are, and one day maybe we'll interview her for Starlight Beacon. It would just be a random episode that came out of nowhere.
She doesn't like ska. I can vouch for that.
Oh, that's hurtful. May 6th, The Acolyte Wayseeker by Justina Ireland is a book coming out. May 13th, the day after my birthday, Star Wars High Republic Tempest Breaker by Kevin Scott. Now, I believe that's an audio that this is just the print version of it coming out, an audio drama, the print version.
Correct. Yes.
June 17th, Star Wars High Republic Trials of the Jedi by Charles Soule. Yeah. July 29th, The Acolyte, The Crystal Crown by Tessa Gratton is coming out. Which I liked the Acolyte show. We didn't talk about it, but I liked the Acolyte show.
Oh, I forgot that was this year. The Acolyte was great.
Yeah, I loved it, and I'm really disappointed that it didn't get more love.
Oh, and Skeleton Crew. Skeleton Crew's perfection.
Yes, we're caught up, and we're loving that. So August 12th, there's a book coming out called Better Ways to Read the Bible by Zach W. Lambert, which I really love, and I'm very excited for that to come out. That's just about how the ways that we've been taught to read the Bible are not necessarily the only ways that they have been historically read, and how we can read the Bible in a more loving way. In spring, there's a book called Cascadia. Now, this one's one that I think you'll like. This is Colin Malloy, the lead singer of the Decemberists, and this is a horror novel.
Oh.
So, and then Tim Whitaker, who runs a podcast and a media presence called The New Evangelicals, he has a book coming out this year. So those are my books I'm looking forward to.
If you hit on all the ones I'm looking forward to, obviously it's Star Wars, especially the High Republic books. The one I want to mention is Witchcraft for Wayward Girls, which actually comes out the end of January. That's by Grady Hendrix. Grady Hendrix is one of the best working horror writers out there, and he does some really fun stuff. So if you're into just really fun horror books, he's best known for My Best Friend's Exorcism. That was turned into a movie a couple years ago on Amazon Prime, but he just does really fun stuff.
Awesome. Gary, this was 53 minutes of Fast and Furious fandom.
Boom, boom. That's what we do here.
But I enjoyed it. And I feel like anyone who's listening to this is going to be exhausted by the end because we're just talking so fast, trying to get through everything.
That's what a podcast should be, Brian.
Yeah, exhausting.
Yes.
I think podcasts should wear humans out.
Yes, you should not want to do anything after you listen to, especially any podcast that I'm on, and I'm on so many of them. Listen to them all.
Yes, you should. Gary, I always love hanging out with you. I do encourage people, especially if you really love horror and, well, specifically Universal Monsters, to go check out Monster Rally Podcast. And that's not all you cover, but that's sort of the core of what you cover is the Universal Monster world. And there's a lot of interesting stuff coming with that. I think that people should come listen to you on the Upbeat. I love all you guys over on the Upbeat, and people should definitely buy all the merch from Backyard Superheroes.
Yes, and Every Song Sucks. We, if you don't know what that is, that's a Real Big
Oh,
Fish
yeah.
podcast.
It's so good.
We just interviewed the first time we've ever had a member of the band on the show, so that is coming out in February. Not going to say who, but it's exciting.
That's awesome. Yeah, Real Big Fish podcast. And that's a shorter podcast, so it's more manageable if you don't have a lot of time to just jump in, catch an episode, and jump out. But they focus on one song per episode, and it's a lot of fun.
It's wacky, wacky, wacky times.
Yeah.
But thanks,
All right,
Brian.
man.
I love you so much. You're such a good friend, and I appreciate that we get to spend this time together. Maybe this is the year we do more podcasts.
I'd be down for it. You know that one of the reasons I have not done as many episodes of the podcast is because I find doing a podcast by myself boring, and I have not had the energy to try and book guests. But I do have some guests that have said yes. It's just been a while since I talked to them, so I need to go back and try and solidify those people. Some really interesting guests that I hope I get to have on.
Well, I'm going to make this decree and this guarantee right now is that this is not the only time you and I will be podcasting this year.
That sounds great. I'm looking forward to it. All right. I think it's time for us to say goodbye, but please, real quick, let me say one more thing. One thing that's changing for the Rudie Librarian, I just posted about it today, is I've started a Substack, and I plan on doing that weekly. The Substack is something I plan on putting out weekly, and so that'll be a way to kind of see what I'm listening to, what I'm watching, what I'm enjoying. It'll also be a place where I talk about faith, and that's been something that I've sort of kept separate for a long time. I didn't want any of my ska friends to feel like I was forcing my faith on them, but at the same time, I felt like I was being untrue to myself by not sharing that part of who I am. So the Substack is a place for me to really dive into that a little bit more deeply. I just posted the first Substack yesterday, and so I encourage you guys to subscribe to my Substack newsletter. I hope to do it once a week. And other than that, look out for more episodes of the podcast and other stuff on social media. Sound good? Gary is still here, but I'm not sure if he can still hear me. So I'm going to say goodbye for both of us. And we really appreciate all of you guys being here, and we'll see you later.